Yeah, because then
No,
we'll grab it down and we'll put it on YouTube, which is part of what I got to help catch up here.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, we're good to go.
All right, awesome. Well, yeah, so a quick stand up from me. I'm actually in the middle of building an office. So I'm kind of doing this thing in my barn where I'm setting up an office that I'll have a little more space to work from and things will be a little better. But as far as the foundation goes, 2 weeks ago, I went through and updated a whole bunch of resources on GitHub to help with navigation, because we do have a Doxify kind of website that goes along with everything that we're storing in GitHub. And there was a little issue of like, you'd click on something, you couldn't get back, and it was a little messy. So I went through and did that. My next target that I'm looking at would be to catch up some of our like videos and make sure that our table is updated with the calls that we've done and getting back into our regular flow. So I mentioned a little earlier that I walked through kind of how to create an agenda with Juliet. And I made a comment down at the bottom of today's agenda too. I was trying to think of a way to make this easier because the more we do it and the more we've had to go through and update, I feel like we're curating a lot of content into the agenda. It's a little troublesome to figure out like, whoa, did we talk about that? Did we capture everything? So I have a little idea that I just love a little thumbs up from everybody if they like it, or any feedback below that. But other than that, that would be my big goal for this week. And I don't really have any blockers. I just think that the goal for me is to keep going to refactor and get everything as cleaned up as possible.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And I know it's been a big help, like even helping me get the audio and everything onto GitHub for the ecosystem calls too. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And all right, so next in line, Lane, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, funny, Jason, you mentioned building the office. Jason and I were kind of commiserating because I'm in the process of moving as well. So that's been quite occupying a lot of time. Yeah, mostly getting caught up on GitHub stuff. I was reading I reviewed some of the work that Jason did. Jason, thank you. The Doxify stuff is like super, super, super helpful, as always. Thank you. Yeah, reviewing the grant applications as well, and the proposal that Jenny put together. I think I don't have a whole lot to add. It all looks great, and I'm really excited to see the grant applications roll in.
Awesome. And I know from foundation side, we've got 8, I think, right now, but they're iterating on each other already. So we're working on that, collaborating.
Brian, I don't know if now is the right time to ask, or if you want to save this for later, but I'm just curious. I've seen a few people weigh in on the grant applications, and I wasn't really sure. Like, I don't want to. That's not really my place. I'm not. I don't work for the foundation. But are you looking for more broader community input on them or not? We can, like I said, come back to it later if that would help.
No, definitely. Like, if you want to comment on there, please do. I mean, in the long run, the GitHub is an interim solution until we move over to grant.io. So that's getting set up. But the reason why that's delayed is because grant.io has community feedback after the approval is done, which is the reverse of what we want. So yes, definitely add comments on there. Okay, cool. And do you have any blockers or anything?
Nope, all good here. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. No problem. All right, Philip, where are you at? There you go. Okay. Other than Easter Island, how's things going there for you?
Well, it's been a lot in my plate as I have many hats leading my small company, and trying to focus on the business model applied to our DApp, and also trying to understand how governance works in an ecosystem. So that's something that try to apply that in our own case, and trying to have feedback on that, and understanding, reading, whatever, studying all that, and see what at the same time we're getting into in our Blockstack ecosystem. It's a lot. So that's every week is worse, and there's lack of time, and sometimes the concept of decentralization sometimes it's a bit chaotic because we don't understand who leads and how that is going to be done, and then so that's, as Jason said, he's losing the loop, and that happens. I think that is happening many cases of working groups. So we're making sure that we have to see the way that it should be done. And this grant proposal, what I probably I was wondering that probably why are we doing this stack proposal? I mean, grant proposal for the governance is because, you know, the actual decentralization of the stack foundations is being done, and then all the previous work that had been done by the PVC is not being done. So that's why that comes up, and so that's something that probably we have to understand, make it clear, so that everybody knows that why are we doing that, you know, because sometimes some other actions that we're thinking are things that previously were done by PVC. Then, of course, the work that was Lane doing, you know, hired by Lane, I don't know, by PVC. I don't know if it was hired by PVC or not, or whatever. Then probably Lane has to take some of these actions but in this new way of governing, probably you had to apply for a grant. So that's what I understand. I'm trying to understand how this is being done, because it's a completely new organization. So that's more or less my situation. It's a lot of work, and I'm trying to work on different things, and I'm leading my team because we have 6 people, and there are 2 people only facing the Blockstack ecosystem, and then the rest they don't get involved because the language is a barrier. So they don't speak, they don't write, they read, but yeah, well, that's all.
Okay, thanks for that. Sounds like it would be good to have some, like Jason and Juliet were working on the protocol of like the agendas and things like that. So getting more consistency around those things would be helpful for what you're doing too, because it's kind of hard to know sometimes. And I find that too, to know where to look and when to look for different meetings and things like that. Oh, Juliet just arrived, I'd admit. But yeah, so I think coming to more consistency around that'll be helpful, because I feel the feeling you're expressing there too. And I know from what you're talking about with Lane and who's paying Lane, he's contracted by the foundation, the Stacks Foundation. So yeah, if that helps clarify things. I don't know, Lane, if you wanted to add anything more to that.
So I think it was PVC because there was no Stacks Foundation at the time.
Oh, right, because it was earlier when Brittany. Yeah, okay, sorry.
I'm just an ordinary community member, volunteer contributor at the moment, just to be clear.
And independent, so you're able to do everything that you need to do independently, which is important. Okay, cool. I just let Brittany in as well. Okay, so then Philip, so, and Juliet, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Okay, perfect. We're just going through stand-ups, so just wanted to give an update of what you've been up to in the past 2 weeks. That'd be great.
Well, the past 2 weeks seem like they've all run together. So I've done some work on training with Jason on the GitHub, and then primarily also was at the meeting last week talking about the work that we wanted to do with respect to the foundation, and that in general, my focus has been outside of Blockstack. My focus has been on policy work and policy work related to data, so data policy, and focused on that. And so that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last few months.
Gotcha. Keeps you busy, I'm sure. Okay, well, thank you for that. And so, Jenny, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So the last couple of weeks have been spent on this grant proposal. So I actually sent out a link to the draft this morning, it's ready for review, and hopefully there's time during this call to review it. Spent last week on a call with Jude, just trying to understand some of the details around this voting mechanism a little more, and looking at the Gaia Hub Inbox's proposal and figuring out a way to sort of scope out this project so that it's something that we could actually include in the grant proposal. So yeah, it's been a really illuminating process to try to turn some of these more, I guess I would call them like nebulous projects up to this point into discrete, concrete tasks that we would propose to the community. And as far as like blockers, I think the goal is to obviously get this approved by the grants program. And there are no blockers other than like us sort of reviewing it and making sure that this is something that we definitely want the community to see, and that it's something that serves the Stacks community and adds value to their lives. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on it and seeing how we can improve it before we submit it. And ideally, if it's all good to go, we could submit it this week. So then we could bring the count of grants up to 9, or proposals or applications up to 9.
Awesome. That sounds good. I know from our end, we're reviewing on Tuesdays, the foundation, updating for Thursday's end of day. And then so they could be like edited for the following Tuesday when we do the next grants review. So yeah, if that helps for your timing for submissions too, there's that. Okay, and then we have Jude. Jude, do you want to go? What have you been up to last 2 weeks?
I've been working on the blockchain. I don't have very many cycles to spare for anything else right now.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. In spite of all that, I know there's a lot going on with that. So, okay, cool. And then I think Brittany was, oh, she might have dropped. Or did I not let her in? Oh no, she's not here now. Okay. No worries, she might have had a technical issue. Okay, so and then from my end, I've been getting into more of different areas the foundation is doing, getting a newsletter going, and starting the grants program and getting those reviews going. So that's been ongoing, as you all know, because you're involved in it. But yeah, I like any feedback I have on the governance committee's grant proposal would be through the submission process itself. So like I won't, because we don't want to give preference to anybody. So you know that's something Jude and Brittany and I have all talked about doing that only once the grant is in process. So that is something that like when you guys are talking about that today, that I'll just kind of keep out of that and yeah, let everybody figure out what they want to do. Okay, so with that, let's move forward to board nominations. So the Stacks Foundation update. I can give some updates from what I know, and Jude, if you want to chime in on any of these. The 3 that are there, so board nominations, community board seat, and bylaws. As far as I know, and as far as I've seen, nothing has changed from our end. There's no update on that. The only thing I've seen update is what Jude has been talking about with the voting, and that could impact on the community board seat, but that is not, I think there's no update on that since last time. I don't know if that would have been 2 weeks ago. If there has been an update in 2 weeks around the voting, it's still about the same, isn't it? Jude?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, there's like the voting for the community board seat, that stuff in the past 2 weeks, nothing's really like, there's no concrete change to discuss on this call here, right?
Well, not quite.
Yeah.
Jenny's been working on the grant proposal for exploring possible different ways to weight the voting.
Yeah.
As well as gaming out different different voluntary votes for these different procedures to see how well they match up against making decisions. That proposal, I think we're going to try that for like, was it 90 days, I want to say? Just to see, just to help us get a better sense of the various types of voting systems under consideration. And then from there we can pick one. But that is the extent of what I know right now.
Perfect. And that would impact the community board seat, but not board nominations, right?
Yeah, anyone can nominate a board can nominate someone for the board.
Okay, cool. And I haven't seen any an update list or anything. I know there was a forum post about it, but everything on GitHub that's here, it's no changes from what I'm seeing here. So and I'm not aware of anything new. I was hoping Brittany could speak to that, but she might be having technical issues there. But yeah, so that's where that's at. So if that's all right, I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to this section, but we could then move on to the grants application draft that Jenny was talking about. How does that sound?
I think I can speak to that too while we go over the
Sure.
grants proposal. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I will move out of the way. Go, Jenny, go.
I'm gonna share my screen. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see that? Great. First comment is I didn't expect it to be so long. So if there are
You can see,
suggestions on how to cut it down. What's that?
sorry, we can see it clearly, but can you just increase the font size a little bit? It's just really tiny.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, the first comment was, I think like what I found in doing this process was that when I would write out one section, I would realize that there's kind of a gap or a disconnect between what we said we wanted to do and what was actually possible. And so would have to add in a detail or two, which is probably why it's a little longer than I would have expected. So maybe this doesn't pass the test of it being concise. So sorry to those of you who have to read it, but we can probably edit it in the meantime. Right, so I'm not sure what the best way to do this is. I don't expect everyone to sort of read it on this call. I think some of you have had some time to skim it. Would it be helpful for me to just go over very quickly each of the sections and I guess cover some ideas that we maybe haven't, or some details that we haven't covered on calls before? Okay. I'm going to take that silence as a yes. Okay, so yeah, the background was interesting to write because I think in the past we have been in agreement about the purpose of this governance group, and in writing the background, I wanted to connect that to why we would sort of seek out support from the Stacks Foundation in the first place, because we don't necessarily need funding or that kind of support to move forward with some of these projects, but it certainly helps because the things that we want to accomplish for community or in service of community are pretty major projects, and things like bounties definitely need to be funded, and we want to compensate developers or Stacks developers and community members for that kind of work. So the background basically sums up what we as a governance working group want to do, which is to advocate for the needs of the Stacks community, mainly by providing them with better tools, especially dev tooling, and better educational material. And considering that the Stacks 2.0 launch is sort of on the horizon, we've been able to identify and prioritize a few key issues. Of the many issues that we could have tackled, we've boiled them down to 3 that would really set us up for success after the launch of Stacks 2. And those issues are testing and implementing a voting mechanism that the entire Stacks ecosystem could use for coming to a consensus or making decisions, developing a Can't Be Evil code of conduct that we could enforce and use to unify the Stacks community. And we can go into details of what that means later in the proposal. And actually building a tool that would enable decentralized notifications and profiles in Blockstack applications, which has been a real need from my understanding since 2018, or has been like on the minds, or it's been top of mind for developers since 2018 when Aaron first proposed this. So the idea is that should we secure support from the grants program, we as a governance working group would take the lead on things like research and project management. So the kinds of efforts that are required to solve the above issues, but we would obviously work very closely with community on actually executing on these solutions. So I think, like said another way, this grant would kickstart several important projects that we've maybe sort of been stop-start on because we've had to rely on PVC, and there isn't like a clear path forward for community development as well. So this grants program not only gives us funding, but it gives us direction, and also sort of endows us with authority from the community to carry out these projects. And if we're successful in this upcoming quarter in at least making progress on these projects, the hope is that we would be able to renew this kind of support and continue working in the same way in upcoming quarters, so into 2021. Any questions on that, everyone? Anyone? Cool. Okay, so as far as the solutions that we're proposing, the first solution, and this is actually fairly new, and this because originally we were pretty set on decentralized Radix, but after our call with Hank, decided to go in a different direction and figured out that a voting mechanism is actually pretty high priority for us. We currently don't have a formal mechanism for, again, coming to a consensus or making decisions within the community. So what we're proposing to do in this upcoming quarter, so Q4 2020, is test, evaluate, and report on at least 4 different voting mechanisms. So one of those mechanisms is the one that Jude and Pascal proposed or worked on, that takes into account the age of a Blockstack name. And quadratic voting is a concept that I think that we as a group have talked a lot about, and community members have also talked a lot about. I think it's worth us testing that. So those are the 2 prominent ones. For the remaining 2, I think that we can leave that open to community members to select. So they would be able to submit other voting mechanisms for consideration the first week that we start this project. And what we're aiming to deliver within this next quarter is obviously testing each of these mechanisms. I think it would be something like every 2 weeks, we would test one of these mechanisms by polling community members on like a relevant issue within the Stacks ecosystem. So a relevant issue could be, you know, based on all the designs you've seen and all the work that you've seen, should we move forward with the new Stacks logo? It would probably, the issues would probably be different, but that's the only example I can think of at the moment. And we would obviously make that data publicly accessible, and would probably use a combination of like block survey and spreadsheets to actually log that data. So it'd be really simple. And Tadia brought this up in the last meeting, which is that it's probably not worth building out any software at this stage, but first testing some of these mechanisms, evaluating them and seeing what works for our community. And when we get to the stage where we actually want to select one of these mechanisms for us, then we can actually build out custom software that we can use, open source custom software that we can use for pretty much any use case in the Stacks community. So that's the first solution. Second solution is to develop and publish a draft code of conduct that we will work with community on actually developing. So I think that a representative of this working group would take the lead on that and would crowdsource content from the community for that. I think originally we thought that we would publish an official code of conduct this upcoming quarter, but taking into consideration the fact that we don't have a voting mechanism in place yet, I think we can commit to a working draft. So a draft that's pretty solid, pretty comprehensive, but isn't officially voted on or approved by community until we actually have a voting mechanism in place, which according to this proposal, I've scheduled for the end of Q1 2021. It could be sooner than that though. And yeah, okay, moving on to the next one. I know we're short on time. Designing, implementing, and like getting participation in a bounty program for the Gaia Hub inboxes proposal. This was another good point that was brought up on the last call, which was that I think it is probably ambitious to try to fulfill the entire proposal by the end of the year. But what we can do is sort of scope the work that needs to be done, break it down into bounties that we can incentivize developers with, and commit to at least fulfilling like half of those bounties by the end of this year to demonstrate that we've made meaningful progress toward this proposal. And Jude mentioned that a reasonable metric of success for this is that by the end of Q1 2021, that's my suggestion on timing, that Blockstack PBC actually adopts the work that has come together on this proposal. So, like in summary, our solutions are to report on 4 different voting mechanisms that could work for the Stacks community, to develop and publish a draft code of conduct that is basically workable by the end of this year, and to implement a bounty program for the Gaia Hub Inbox's proposal. Did anyone have any questions there? So there are a lot of details there that we haven't discussed, and those details aren't anything like out of the box necessarily. I've just included them for the purposes of like project management for this proposal. No.
I have a question.
Sure.
When did we discuss the other 3 voting mechanisms? I don't have a problem with quadratic and voting, but I don't remember discussing additional voting methods other than what Jude had proposed.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I figured that that might be a point of contention. I put quadratic voting in there just because we, as a group, have discussed it a lot, but we could change that out completely. The number 4 is, I should have also mentioned, is arbitrary. I just was basing it on the amount of time we have and like how realistically how much time we would need to test one mechanism. So it could be up to 4. It could be 2 if we're only confident in testing 2. And if we aren't happy with testing quadratic voting, then we don't have to. And that can be totally up to the group. But there is room for communities to submit their own proposals for the mechanisms that we do test.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, do let us know if you think of other mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry, I will.
Okay. All right, so for scope, there are just more details in this section about how we would go about achieving these projects. So I basically described how testing and evaluation of the voting mechanisms would play out. I've included some things here that are totally also up for debate, like this here. We will ensure that each test sees participation from at least 50 community members in order to gather sufficient data. That is a number off the top of my head. If we have different opinions on that, please feel free to chime in there. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So because the grant is very focused on deliverables, what I've mentioned here for the voting mechanisms is that the deliverable we'd commit to producing is by the end of the year, there would be a report analyzing the efficacy of each of these voting mechanisms. But if there is like a better way that we think that we can demonstrate those results, that's also up for debate as well. A report seems like a pretty standard way to do that. For the Can't Be Evil Code of Conduct, how does everyone feel about the deliverable being a working draft as opposed to an official draft? And the reason, again, for this is that we won't have a voting mechanism in place until next year. So we wouldn't actually get official consensus from community on the code of conduct until that voting mechanism is in place. Does it, do people think that's unnecessary to do?
I think it makes sense to have a working draft.
Okay.
Yes, but at least the consensus of the that are working is sufficient at the beginning, and a minimum consensus, and at least that has been researched in the survey that we already made. So there's something that we can take out from that that's a base. It's not based on out of the sky, but at least it was mentioned in the original survey.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There, like in this scope, it does mention us or a representative of this group taking lead on broad research of existing codes of conduct, and we would take inspiration from those. So we would definitely refer to any information that we have about our community, but also modeling this code of conduct after other codes of conduct that work for other communities. So that will definitely be part of the process. It's not necessarily that we're writing it completely from scratch. I think that we have other documents to refer to, but unlike other documents, this would be drafted very much in collaboration with community and with very specific demographics of the community in mind. And I guess this is a good point to emphasize. So before we actually get consensus on the code of conduct using a voting mechanism, the only way that I could imagine us getting some sort of approval is just like qualitative approval from community members via comments and working group calls, which will all be public or are public, and just basic sentiment that we see in Discord in the forum. And we can obviously gather that to make a case for our code of conduct, which is why it's a working draft. So if we see that in general, there's a positive reaction to the working draft, that is enough. And it can be something like and these are all details that you all can plug into, but it can be like a GitHub issue and people can make changes to it if they want to, until it's actually time to vote for it when the voting mechanism is in place. So it seems like the big thing here that I want to emphasize is that it seems like a lot is riding on this voting mechanism being established, but it's also exciting because we will have something like that, or we are really making progress toward, or we're committing to making progress toward having a mechanism like that in place that will actually help us make these decisions officially. Okay, so last thing is the Gaia Hub inboxes. I have to say, technically, I couldn't break down this proposal into specific bounties myself. So I say, discrete 3 to 6 discrete bounties. That number can also change based on what the developers in this call think. I don't know if 3 to 6 is too many or not enough. I don't even, we do think that a bounty program could cover development of this proposal though, right? We've said that on previous calls, but I just want to make sure that we're still thinking that.
Well, I think the one thing that keeps coming to mind for me here, like looking at how large this proposal has become, is it worth breaking it into 3 separate grant sort of proposals or ideas? And would that be helpful in also identifying those individual milestones and everything else? But I do imagine that it would be possible, and I'm curious to see others' input. We definitely have a lot in the forum and everything else, but the actual milestones that we would like to see, I imagine they can be broken down into at least 3, if not more.
I think the grant proposal needs to have a pretty detailed design document attached to it. One way that I could see this going south really fast and getting nothing done is this turning into some sort of design by committee process that ends up becoming an unwieldy engineering project. Either that, or we make sure that like when the recipients are decided, we make sure that that person or people, that team, are able to see the project through to completion.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
go
sorry.
ahead.
The work here is really just to design that breakdown, right? It's just, we're saying we're going to do some work to make this proposal. This is the Gaia Hub inbox work itself is not part of this grant, right? What I see is,
I mean,
yeah.
Design a bounty.
I'm confused now because I thought that this grant was going to be. I thought that I thought that we were actually trying to build this. Like the design's pretty much, I don't know. there's that forum thread that talks about the design, and the design is pretty much settled.
So the goal, Jude, is to get it built, but get it built in collaboration with community. I think we've all agreed that it would definitely be too much work for the few people on this call, however talented we know they are, to try to build this out. So the idea would be that this group would sort of drive a program that gets that work done. So it would be on us to sort of scope out that proposal and turn it into different bounties. And we could basically compensate Stacks community developers for building different aspects of it. And once all of those bounties are fulfilled, you basically have a finished product. I don't know if I'm confused on that. But yeah, we'd have a finished product, and we would have basically distributed a bunch of the work amongst community members rather than trying to take it on ourselves. So the work that the governance group would do is turning it into a bounty program in the first place and marketing it and making sure that developers are properly onboarded to the bounty program. And, you know, it could be something like a GitHub, or not a GitHub, a Gitcoin campaign or dev post, or we could self-host it or whatever. But it would give the opportunity, it would give other community developers the opportunity to help with this proposal rather than having us build the whole thing ourselves.
I understand. That's not the concern that I have, though. The concern that I have is that we have a bunch of different people. You're familiar with the phrase "too many chefs in the kitchen," right?
Mm-hmm.
This has the potential to go that way. I think the proposal needs to specifically constrain the number of people who can work on it. Like, it's better to have one person spend 6 months working on this than to have 6 people spending 1 month working on this.
Okay.
Would it be helpful, Jude, to take that forum post and break it down into like a specific design document that would be part of a bounty?
I believe so. I think that this particular grant, I think, has a very tight procurement process. I think that the procurement process could very well be like, we will come up with a detailed design document that describes exactly what needs to be done. And in doing so, we de-risk the possibility of the project starting off 6 different ways and getting nowhere, because each person starts from square one over and over again.
Okay.
But there's some experience on what is mentioned as the functionality that's been looked for, and so then probably also we have to research those functionalities. I have seen as our company, we have developed a way to do that, the same thing that is being proposed, and there's some others. I think that there's a couple ones more that maybe we can take those as a base of what we could be done, and also maybe make a kind of a standard, and that can be put in the Gaia Hub. I don't know if it's that considered or not, but there's already work already done for the same purpose. I don't know how we do that.
So I think what if we were to take that forum post, break it down into the detailed design document, the implementation details could still be, different implementations could be proposed by different teams. It's just that the bounty would go to the one that most successfully filled all of the design requirements. So I don't think it rules out any specific existing work. I feel like it just gives us an opportunity to kind of focus on what this grant is going to accomplish, and B, out of that detailed design document, what are the requirements that we want to see accomplished, and in taking kind of the solution that you guys have already into kind of fundamental infrastructure, right? So there's definitely, it's not like a one-to-one kind of thing, implementing from an app perspective versus a foundational infrastructure. But I think just having the design document would allow us to have multiple potential implementations that could work, and we'll figure out the best one after that.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. The project is small enough that we could probably afford to have multiple implementations being built concurrently, even if only one of them gets used. But do keep in mind though, like the recipient of this work and the person and the entity that has to live with the decisions made now for a long time is PBC. And if the implementation doesn't behave in a way that PBC feels comfortable operating it as part of the public Gaia Hub, then the work's for naught. Like the vast majority of users won't even see the benefit. So I'm just trying to emphasize the importance on making sure that there's no surprises in the implementation. Like we know what we're getting into, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it sounds like having multiple seemingly independent bounties isn't the way to go on this. That would probably lead to it being pretty disjointed, but we're not opposed to having competition amongst submissions. Right? We would actually welcome different implementations, but we do need a detailed design document up front to guide the development of this. And hopefully we get one really high, or we get several really high quality implementations from this bounty, but it would be one, and it would reward maybe one developer or one team rather than several across several bounties.
And to Jude's point then, can we get a commitment from PBC to helping us with the architecture of this, signing off on architecture?
Yeah, I was just about to propose that. We should get some engineer from PBC to try to oversee this, like to make sure the design is sound and to be a resource available to all the teams participating.
I have put here with the help of the Blockstack PBC engineering team as a placeholder. I wasn't committing anyone specifically, but I figured I should put that in there.
Yeah,
okay.
But we need a commitment from them to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Seems like a reasonable change that we could make to that section. Okay, so we'll have to revise that a little bit, but I do think that Jude's suggestion for measure of success is still relevant here. I think the way that we would measure success is is by the end of Q1 2021 or so, the implementation that we come out with from this bounty program is good enough that PBC will feel comfortable integrating this implementation into its production Gaia Hub.
To just break it down a bit more, like that will require sign off from like the DevOps team, for example, at PBC, since they're going to be the ones who have to maintain it in production.
Okay. That's good to know. Thanks, Jude. I think this is pretty straightforward. The team section, the risks section, and I assume there are more technical risks that I've missed here, so please, others, feel free to add to this section. I'd said our biggest risk is just running into insufficient time. I think that these timelines don't feel ambitious now, but they will be given a lot of the work that's happening in the background on Stacks 2. And when we talk about this work in terms of like it getting done in 3 months, it sounds doable, but I think that these projects, we're asking for funding to kickstart these projects next quarter, but the projects themselves or the projects in isolation are 6-month plus type projects. So unless we're extremely disciplined and committed to tracking our work in like a Kanban board, I think that the progress here can get unwieldy. But the beauty of that is that we have a governance working group that is willing to take the lead on managing these projects. So written a little bit about that there. Again, also up for debate. I think originally I had 3,000 in what we were asking for the grant. I bumped it up to 4,000 just for the bounties, because I know that development of that proposal will probably take a lot of time. So 3,000 would go toward the bounty program for Gaia Hub inboxes, and 1,000 would go toward miscellaneous costs supporting work for the other projects.
Can we Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dan.
I don't know if anybody has specific time to devote to shepherding this, but it might be valuable to have some money identified directly for project management of this. So who's on the call here? I don't know if anybody can or would want to commit to that, or if that's an option that we want to even add in, but it seems to me like you're saying that we need a way to track this stuff, and I'm not sure that a weekly meeting of the group is maybe the best way. So I'm just throwing it out there, like maybe we add some specific funding for project management towards shepherding this grant.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good way to break down this miscellaneous 1,000. So I actually have included that, for each of these projects, it would be a representative of the governance group would take the lead on this, and it should be no more than a couple of hours a week of really just checking in. But that time should be compensated. So I think this 1,000 for miscellaneous costs could definitely go toward compensating a project manager for updating those Kanban boards, which, as we know from Jason and Juliet's experience, is actually really time consuming.
Right.
And yeah, we obviously don't have to choose project. Well, I mean, we can. We have 6 minutes left, but project managers for each of these work streams.
Yeah, we can do that offline too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
One final question, I think, and I'll shut up, is let's say we create a bounty and nobody applies for it. What happens with that funding? Do we return it? Do we need to specify that in here? Does it go towards, I don't know.
I would really hope that people apply for money. But what does the group think? If we're unsuccessful in marketing the bounty, part of this is marketing the bounty program and getting people to participate. But if we're unsuccessful in doing that, what should we do?
What if we just had an expiration? Like, this bounty will be retracted after X months, at which point, or at which point, like, PBC, the foundation, or whoever is putting the money up has the right to proactively hire someone to do it or do it themselves or something like that.
Is there a way to stipulate the funding only the actual bounty part only gets funded if there's a successful entry?
I'm sorry, successful what?
A successful entry for the bounty? A successful submission?
Yeah, like we wouldn't pay for you sending us a picture of Nyan Cat, for example, and calling that a guy have inbox.
I would pay for that, but yeah.
Well, Dan is clearly not going to lead that work stream then.
What I'm saying was that, I don't know how the distribution happens, but that part of the distribution would only happen on successful submission.
Yeah, I think a way to codify this is the grant would have to have very specific success criteria that must be met and must be evaluable, quantifiable, not subjective to the best possible extent. How do we know the guy have inbox is working? Well, here's a battery of unit test that must pass or something like that. Or maybe somebody has to be able to build an MVP app that makes use of it and the app works. Does that sort of thing work? Because if you can pass this test, then that means you get the money. The thing clearly is working.
Yeah.
Of course, obvious.
Yeah. Would be a pretty bad
But
grant if you couldn't do that.
what about the potential review? We were talking about review by PBC engineers. So would that come after this person has, or this group or team has created the MVP? Mm-hmm. So where does that fit in? Because that needs to fit in, obviously, for it to be a solution that's going to be used.
So what we could do is once the grant entry has expired and everyone who wanted to participate has submitted a candidate implementation, we can have PBC do a blind review of each submission. Whatever engineer and PBC puts up for shepherding the process can be responsible for reviewing each submission and then picking the one that they feel is the best implementation. but they won't know who the authors are.
That sounds good. What does everyone else think?
Yeah, I think that's good. Personally, I think we require their input at the beginning and at the end, because I think, like, to make it super a higher chance of actually being useful is like we'll want maybe even details down to like coding styles or something like that. I don't know if that's part of it, but we don't want somebody submitting something that works and then it's going to require another 100 hours of cleanup to actually get submitted, right? So we need to get super detailed at the front end as well as have the review at the back end.
Yeah, like these, I don't know if any of you guys, anyone on this call has done Google Summer of Code when they were younger, like as a student. But this is starting to sound a lot like how this works, and it's a very successful program. I did it when I was in undergrad. The way it works is Google finances students through a grant proposal for about the same amount of money. It's $5,000, at least the time I did it, over the course of 3 months. And it's milestone based. You as a student are assigned a mentor who you check in with every so often, and they review your progress and they decide whether or not to release the next month's worth of payment. This kind of feels like we're recreating this process, which is I think it's a good thing, because it's the protocol has a proven track record. What we could do is we could have 3 check-ins or something throughout the duration of the grant program, where the teams who sign up and submit their proposals for the implementation will check in with a PBC engineer who will just give them early feedback. Like, are you on the right track? Like, are you making the right design assumptions? Like, can we course correct? That sort of thing. So that way we avoid the trap of, like, 3 months later, like a team might go completely off base and be disappointed by it, and rightfully so. So having like a fixed number of check-ins at fixed points in time, like to make sure that you're on the right track, I think would be a good thing to help maximize the chance of success for everybody.
Agree.
That's super helpful. So I see that we're just at about time. This was really helpful. Was at least the overview of this proposal clear? And but obviously everyone has time to review this individually as well. Is anyone just outright really upset with the proposal?
I do have is this on the Dropbox or is this a new document?
This is the one that we're looking at now, right, Juliet? Is that what you're?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah. It's a new doc, but I have included links to the other documents, so this doesn't get unwieldy. You can just refer to this doc from here on out if you want to just look at the brainstorming document and the outline and all, yeah, where we've had other work. I would say 2 outstanding things before we leave today. Well, number one, if there is anyone on this call who feels strongly about volunteering to be project manager for one of these work streams, please announce yourself. I know that I'm happy to help with the code of conduct just because I have looked into that a little bit. So having another representative of the group to work on that with would be great. We would just need.
I can help on that.
Which one, Philip?
The one that you mentioned.
Oh.
There's so many things I can do, but not all I can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or just assign me something that. I don't know. It's
That's dangerous, but okay.
yeah,
and everyone else can have a think about it. Do we want to set a deadline for when we want to get feedback in and have a final draft of this ready for submission?
Just a quick note for me on the project management side. With everything I've been trying to help out with on GitHub and managing the boards and stuff, I'm happy to lend some time both to that and to the code of conduct as well. I think this whole idea of a Can't Be Evil manifesto is something that's come up before. I know that you and I and Dan have talked about it, so I think there's definitely some room to do that. So I'm willing to put some time towards this as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. All right, so we don't have a meeting scheduled next Thursday since we're doing the semi-monthly cadence, and the next round of reviews for grants, as I understand it, is Tuesday.
Yep.
So I mean, we can just do a lot of this asynchronously, and figure out on Discord how we want to approve a final draft. At the moment, it looks like there are just a few tweaks to make, plus getting that design document in for this Gaia Inbox's proposal, and that's it. Is there anything else that's like anything else glaring about this proposal that we should address?
I think that the most important of all this is code of conduct, because it's getting dangerous. Every week I see things that are getting out of the usual community behavior, so that we have to be careful with that, and that's we have to protect the community, and that's one of the most important things. And technical stuff doesn't matter. It's just we have to protect the conduct of the community.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, we should have that's probably one of the easier things to manage, I think. So we should have a working draft of that by the end of the year. But okay, sorry for going over by 4 minutes, everyone. I think there's other stuff on the agenda. I don't know if we want to, Brian, it's your call if we want to keep going through that agenda, or are there other topics?
Just what's on the agenda there. I know, Julia, there's a lot that was added to this week, and I knew with this conversation about the proposal, it would take up a chunk of time, and it's an important conversation to have. So, Juliet, since you set the agenda, what do you think?
Most of those things were things that had previously been on, and there hadn't been some decisions made about them. And so that's why we brought them back again to see that we could make some decisions. We don't need to do that this week. We can put that forward to a next meeting.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. So they can be copied over to a meeting for 2 weeks from now. I see Jason nodding. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
All right.
The biggest thing with that is we had this rolling agenda, right? So we didn't want to miss out on our action items or discussion items, but just for, I guess, anybody looking at this recording or anywhere else, look at the tags and the issues. That's an easy way to see what those items are. And my comment on making these agendas a little more streamlined, which is on today's agenda, I think between the two, we can find a way to balance our time for that, because I don't want to waste a whole ton of time going over things, but we also don't want things to get lost that we've talked about in the past as well.
Sure.
So just finding the best way we can all address that, but I'm fine with addressing that at a later time. I know we are running over.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, well, we can copy those forward to the next agenda, and then from here, I'm looking forward to seeing things coming in for the grants application once that's all sorted out. So yeah, thanks for coming, everybody, and hopefully catch you on the Stacks Ecosystem call later tonight. It's at 9 o'clock Eastern time. It's for Asia, so that's why it's later. But anyway, catch you later. Thanks for coming. I was waving and I have no video on. Anyway, I'll narrate that. Okay, bye for now.